Okay, my apologies about that. Getting started once more, now recording. Thank you all for joining today. My name is Hannah Carrillo. I'm the Legislative Liaison in the Mayor's Office. I'm joined today by my two colleagues, Waleska Alves and Denise Molina Capers, and we are here to provide an anti-bias training in the realm of recruitment. And I did want to share with you all that the staff liaisons got a very similar training last week, and this week we are doing a training for members. So just wanted to share that both sides of this are receiving this training. Waleska, do you want to go ahead and introduce yourself?
Sure. Thank you so much, Hannah. Hi, everyone. My name is Valeska Alves. I'm the recruitment manager here at the City of Somerville. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm really excited to be here. Thank you so much again for your time. I will pass it on to Denise.
Hi, everyone. Denise Molina Capers, Director of Racial and Social Justice Department, also part of the Mayor's Executive Administration. I'll be on video soon. I'm just having issues with my video.
All right. Thank you, Denise. So we just did our welcome and introduction. Again, thank you all for joining. I know this is an optional training, so we do appreciate your time. And we are, obviously now we are recording, so we will be sharing the recording out with anybody who's not able to attend as well. So just to give you a look at our agenda, Denise will be going over some community norms next. I'll also be talking a little bit about our current policy guidelines. We'll go into some key definitions. We'll briefly touch on interviewing guidelines, but I know that doesn't apply to everybody. Not all of you are involved in the interview process, so we probably won't spend too much time on that. Then we'll really get into the meat of common biases, and then we'll talk about takeaways, and we'll have some time at the end for questions. Denise, are you able to do the community norms?
Yes, ma'am. I'm still trying to figure out my video, but I am good to go. So thank you, everyone, for joining us. Again, we just want to share with you a few community norms so that we are able to have everyone be on the same page, feel heard and respected. And so for this, we would like for you to speak your truth and use I statements. We would like respect everyone's opinion, listen with an open mind and heart, expect and accept non-closure. And we have a pretty packed agenda today of the presentation. So we do ask that if you have any thoughts or questions, if you can please put it in the chat as a parking lot, and we will definitely get to it at an appropriate time. So if you can please put it in the chat, we will be watching and we will address it at the appropriate time.
Thank you very much, Denise. I do see we have a few folks with their hands up. Waleska, would you be able to unmute? I saw Brian Postawait.
Brian, you're unmuted.
Can you hear me?
Yes, thank you so much.
Two things. One, the chat is not enabled yet. Otherwise, I would have just asked my question via the chat. The second is, could somebody define I statements and non-closure?
Absolutely,
So,
Denise. Yep.
Yep. So when we're talking about I statements, what we're talking about is, for example, if I am speaking and I say, because all Latino people would like for this to happen, I'm not speaking for all Latino people. I should be speaking for myself. So I, as a Latina woman, would like for this to happen. And then expect and accept non-closure is the fact that these are conversations that do not have an end point. If they did, the RSJ department wouldn't have a space in the city of Somerville. So there are going to be topics that we may run into. There may be questions that we may run into that we may not necessarily have an answer for today, or that we may not necessarily have time to exhaust and really process. So it is very much a usual thing where we talk about any DEI topic that there is never really going to be closure to certain conversations that may come up. So we have to accept that that is a reality in this part of DEI and conversation. I hope that was helpful.
Thank you, Denise.
Thank you, Brian. Great questions. If we are all set, I'll go on to the next slide. So this slide should be familiar to some of you because we did also review this when we released the code of conduct, which we asked all board members to sign on to, and thank you all for doing that. So this is the same language because this language is guiding all of our work towards making our board and commission appointment process and engaging with our boards and commissions and recruiting and the whole gamut of board and commission work is really rooted in making sure that each board, commission, and committee is there to support the city of Somerville, and that they encourage all residents to participate in the local government's decision making and planning processes. So I'm repeating these because they're really foundational to our specific work in regard to board and commissions, but also at a higher level, these are really important mission, values, and vision of the city of Somerville and the Ballantyne administration. So I just wanted to take a minute to reiterate them. The values are that the city of Somerville sets a high priority on the core values of equity, transparency, access, and social justice. Prioritizing these values helps to make a meaningful and actionable progress on our greatest challenges and our community members' most urgent needs. And the vision of this work is to standardize the process and guidelines around board, commission, and committee membership, recruitment, which also includes, outreach, interviewing, appointment, and onboarding, and DEI frameworks to ensure it is equitable and increases the representation of all community members in Somerville. So while this training today is on a specific topic of anti-bias recruiting, we really just kind of always want to come back to these core principles. Denise?
So we want to be able to lay the foundation for everyone in terms of what exactly are we discussing today. And so to do this, we are going to be sharing with you some key definitions that we think are important in order to have a better understanding and foundational knowledge of where exactly are we going with the guidance that we're giving for recruitment and interviewing for commissions, boards, and committees. So the first definition that we wanted to share with you was the definition of anti-bias. And anti-bias is opposing or prohibiting unfair discrimination against people. And that's not just based on race, but that's based on anything that may present as different or unique in a person's character, identity.
Sorry, Denise, I'm just going to pause you for a second. I do see, I think people might be having a hard time hearing you. Is there a way where you might be able to maybe just try to quiet the background noise just a little bit?
Okay. Don't know how to do that, but sorry. See, maybe if I take you off of my headset, that's
okay. In the meantime, I see Harriet has her hand up, so I just want to confirm. Harriet, is that what you were raising your hand for?
That was part of it. I'm suggesting, because we were on the phone with somebody else last night, and we have earbuds, and one of them has the microphone and the other doesn't, the wired ones, and when this person put the earbud on that had the microphone, suddenly their voice became much clearer. And since I'm totally dependent as a blind person on listening, the fidelity is really important. And also, it seems that my partner says that the chat is still not enabled, at least for Frank and Harriet. So is it possible that there's still a technical glitch for putting questions in the chat?
So this is a webinar style. So I don't believe that the chat is enabled. I am working on it while I'm sharing screen. It's hard for me to check on that. So I am trying to work on that in the background. But In the meantime, Denise, can you try your audio again?
Yeah, if I'm signing in through my laptop, so if you can make me a host, I can have on my headset with the mic. there.
You should be, I
Can you see me?
believe I made you a co-host, so you should have that.
Okay, now I'm in. All right, so I'm gonna sign off of this.
Great. Give me one sec. Yep. Thank you for raising that, Harriet. I appreciate it. Definitely want to make sure that everybody can clearly hear. Thanks. Yeah.
Okay, can you guys hear me?
Can you try again, Denise? Denise, are you with us? I think she might have had to pop out and pop back in to address her audio. Thank you so much, everybody, for your patience. Appreciate it. Okay, it looks like Denise got signed out. I'm sorry, everybody. I'm just going to stop sharing for just 1 minute so I can go ahead
Hannah,
and
I did
just...
try to make Denise the host, hopefully.
Yes, I also did
Promote to panelist.
as well.
Thanks everyone for your patience. Oh, Denise.
Well, we do have the chat going though. So
Oh, yes.
one
All right, there we
problem
go.
solved.
There we go.
Okay, so now it says that it cannot stop my video because the host has stopped it.
Okay, but I can hear you.
Okay,
Which
as long
is
as you
great.
can hear me, that's okay.
Okay, let me just get
So
my...
can you hear me better now?
I fixed it. Try again. Try video again.
Okay, thank you, Kim.
Okay, and we can hear you much better. So whatever you did worked. So thank you, Harriet, as well.
Thank you, Harriet, for that. And good thing I brought my headset here. All right. So thank you everyone for your patience. We love technology. So anti-bias is opposing or prohibiting unfair discrimination. And this is not just for purposes of race, but this is also for the purposes of religion, any identifying characteristics, whether that's visual or non-visual, whether that's how someone identifies. And so being anti-bias means that we prevent people from being discriminated against for any identifying uniqueness that you can either see or not see, or that they verbally share. We wanted to also share with you the definition of anti-racism, because many people think that saying that they are not a racist automatically makes them an anti-racist. However, anti-racism is very specific in that it involves having practices aimed at challenging, addressing, and eradicating racism and its systemic manifestations. So it means that if we are saying that we are an anti-racist, we are putting things in action to eradicate what is being done within structures, policies, practices. So essentially, Somerville having an RSJ department, having a Somerville department, Hannah and I working on equity and inclusion within the commissions, boards, and committees, all of these things are considered anti-racist because we are putting things in action, not just saying that we are a city that values diversity and inclusion and equity. When we're talking about implicit bias, it's a little bit different than just bias, because implicit bias directly has to do with the fact that as human beings, we are all biased. We all have our biases. We may be aware of them or we may not be aware of them. And implicit bias speaks specifically to the fact that those implicit biases are the ones that we're not always aware of. The ones that we tend to make a snap judgment and make a comment if somebody walks into the room that's could be judgmental, or that could be preconceiving what someone is bringing to the table. And so, in short, it's knowledge from experience, from childhood experiences, from pre-existing structures of, you know, how we grew up, work experiences that make us interpret things a certain way and come to information quickly that's more in the realm of judgments, without any real facts, and more so opinions. And it really does tell us who we are and what makes us feel safe, what do we value, what are our integrity points. But we are not always aware of this, because to be an anti-bias person, there must be a lot of reflection that has to happen, and that reflection helps us become more self-aware. So we wanted to also share with you the dimensions of diversity, because again, you know, people tend to revert back to race when they are discussing diversity. And so this right here is a visual of how diversity is not just race, it's not just gender, sexual orientation. It has many dimensions, and these dimensions have to do with that you were born and were raised. It has to do with the organizational structures that you have been exposed to, whether that's in your youth or as an adult in your work experiences. It has to do with the external influences, your relationship status, your social status, what country you live in, what city you live in. As we know, city to city, things are very different. It has to also do with your personal style, your internal influences, which are the usually people think of internal gender, age, sexual orientation, nationality as the only dimension of diversity. But as you can see, there are many levels and areas to it. So then that leads us to intersectionality, because even within these dimensions, there are ways in which they intersect. So if I wanted to share with someone how I identify, I'm not just going to say, I am a Latina. I can say, I am a Latina woman. I am a Latina woman that was born and raised in New York and the Dominican Republic. I am a Latina woman who was born and raised in New York and the Dominican Republic, and I'm also a mom to a 4-year-old toddler. I can keep going. And all of these different shades that I've just shared with you have to do with intersectionality. So when we're thinking about a person, it's very important to make sure that we are identifying the different ways in which one person can identify, and not assume that because we are looking at someone that we understand what diversity means to them, what equity means to them, and what identity means to them.
Thank you, Denise. I see Harriet's hand is up, so I'm just gonna unmute her.
Thank you for the different ways in which we generally think of diversity. And I would just love to add to that general list, because it wasn't mentioned, is disability is not purely identity. It is also very strongly a part of, if we have a visible disability, either by being in a wheelchair or by using a cane or by movement patterns. But nevertheless, also, as you pointed out, when we grow up as children, we inherit from our families how they reacted to people with disabilities. So I'd love to add that to the big list of, you know, racial, gender, et cetera, because those are some of the ones that are pretty buried for people. You know, they don't really recognize in themselves, oh, I avoid getting too close to some, you know, someone who's blind, or I avoid getting near someone who's spastic, or whatever you want to call movement disorders, things like that. So, but it's underneath the radar. Lots of people don't realize that they did grow up with a bias that there's something wrong with someone who has a disability. So I would love it if that were included in the in this view of bias. So that's all. Thank you.
Thank you, Harriet. And I intentional to add that to our lines. And I think you make a very good point. I think that would be a really great conversation for us to have at a workshop. As a mother, my son has a disability, and sometimes we come to the doctor, oftentimes come to the doctor, and there's other children who also have disabilities, and he doesn't really know how to respond to them. And as a mom, I've caught myself thinking, like, I haven't prepared him for, I haven't given him a toolkit to say, like, it's okay, say hello, puppy. You know what I mean? But I think it's a very good conversation to have citywide. So thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you both for sharing that. So the next section, and I mentioned this a little bit at the top, we're going to talk about recruiting and interviewing, but I just want to recognize that I know not all members are involved in interviewing in the same way. We do have 14 boards and commissions that have their interviewing process done by the Appointments Advisory Committee. So I just want to acknowledge that we're going to be doing the interviewing slides pretty high level, just because I know it doesn't necessarily apply to all members in the same way. But one way that we definitely need all members on board is to widen our recruitment channels. So every single board and commission seat that is vacant needs to be advertised for. We're very strict about this to make sure that there is an opportunity for anyone to apply for any given seat. That being said, we have standard channels for how the city and our comms department gets these opportunities out there, but we can always do more. We can always get them out further, and having members also help us with that and share those calls, not only within the networks of the folks on the boards that you currently serve, but also in all of your other capacities, right? All of you are dynamic folks in a variety of different spaces, which makes you all amazing board members. But we also want you to use your other networks to help us get the word out just as far as we can, because we really need that boost in order to recruit just robust volumes of candidates. I will just note we have a lot of boards and commissions in Somerville, more than most other places. So that can result in, from time to time, we end up putting calls out for multiple seats, and sometimes it can be a little bit overwhelming. So we do want to be thoughtful and strategic on how we release vacant seats. If we release 100 at one time, we're probably not going to have the greatest recruiting with that. So we do want to be thoughtful. But that being said, I really just wanted to impress upon you all how important it is to help us get the word out when there is a vacant seat and when your board or commission is about to embark on a recruiting process. So happy to have further conversations, and if there's additional information that you all feel you need, please reach out in order to do that. But I just wanted to impress upon you all that as members, we are also, hoping that you can help us to recruit to the best of our ability. Waleska's going to talk about these slides, but I also just want to flag that this one in particular is really just what staff liaisons are responsible for. So I don't want to get folks overwhelmed by new tasks. We're not giving anybody new tasks. Thank you, Waleska. If you want to go ahead, I'll stop now.
Thanks, Hannah. Hi, everyone. Valeska here again. So as Hannah mentioned, the interview process is an important component of recruiting, but we are recognizing that not all members will be involved in this process. So just very high level, some of the things that staff liaisons are tasked with are, deciding who will be involved in the interview process, establishing a diverse interview panel will help us think more broadly and inclusively when selecting candidates, developing a candidate profile, as an interview committee, deciding what attributes and skills we are looking for in the ideal candidate, thinking about what skills and characteristics will address the representation and goals of the commission, committees, and boards. And then also designing an interview process that's consistent across all candidates. We need to make sure to ensure equity by completing each step of the selection process. Okay, so at the interview, just again, very high level, but we want to put the candidate at ease. Let them know what's expected regarding the length of the interview, how many questions will be asked, and what the next steps look like in the process. We always want to think about interviewing as a two-way conversation. We're helping them to figure out if this opportunity is right for them. And then we're going to be diving into some of the common unconscious biases that impact our decisions and selection. So recognizing unconscious bias and how that can creep into the decision making. And then avoid unstructured interview questions. The liaisons do have access to our standard interview question. And as always, make sure to give candidates an opportunity to share any final thoughts or any questions that they have. And then post-interview, just going through each desired candidate criteria, debriefing as a group. We always try to refrain from asking general questions such as, what did you think? Which is more catered towards intuition. And then challenging any bias, helping each other stay accountable, and referring back to our ideal candidate persona as a touch point. All right, so now that we've very high level discussed some of the general best practices in recruiting and interviewing, we're going to dive into some of the most common unconscious biases. And we're looking at it from the lens of interviewing and recruiting, but to be honest, these can happen in our day-to-day while we're at work, while we're interacting with others in our day-to-day life. But as Denise mentioned, unconscious biases are assumptions that we make about people, and we may make them without even realizing it. Especially in recruiting and hiring, unconscious bias can be a problem because it can lead employers to make irrational hiring decisions that are based on stereotypes or personal preconceptions rather than what the candidate actually brings to the table and what the requirements are of the position. So like Denise mentioned, ensure if you're a human, you're biased. There's really no way to be completely conscious at all times, but we can be informed and knowledgeable about how biases impact our decision making and our thinking, and we can work to be aware of them while we are making hiring decisions. So here we're going to today be talking about the top 5 most common biases that can occur in recruiting that we want to be mindful of. So one of the most common biases is first impression bias. So this is when our brain processes information really quickly and causes us to make quick and incomplete observations about others based on the first piece of information that comes to mind, or first piece of information that we perceive. So in interviewing, this can be in the form of making up your mind about a candidate in the first few moments of meeting them based on how they're dressed, their ethnicity, race, disability, gender, etc. Nonverbal bias is basing an opinion on someone's body language. So interviewers and candidates commonly communicate using nonverbal cues such as postures and gestures, as well as verbal dialogue. So when an interviewer prioritizes nonverbal communication over actually assessing the candidate's skills and qualifications, this can be considered as nonverbal bias. So all in all, reading body language can lead us to make the wrong conclusions about people. All right, then another common bias is contrast bias. So judging performance against the person that came before them and not the hiring criteria. So it's very natural for us to compare and contrast one interviewee against another, but it's best practice to refrain from letting that process cloud your judgment too much when making these hiring decisions. So for example, say one interview goes really poorly, and then you interview another candidate later on that day, and the interview goes great. The contrast between the two interviews might make you think that the later candidate was more qualified than they actually were. So a more fair and more effective hiring practice is to weigh each candidate against the job description itself versus each other. Negative emphasis bias. So negative emphasis bias occurs when the interviewer allows a small amount of negative information to outweigh positive information. Negative information often leaves a stronger impression than positive information. So when a negative detail about a candidate informs the rest of an interview, this can impact the hiring process. And this may be an example of negative emphasis bias. So for example, say an interviewee is late, that could be an example of this. Say it's an internal candidate that you're interviewing and you heard from others that they had low performance. You may be letting that cloud your judgment based on that candidate. And then the last one that we're going to be talking about today is similar to me bias, or this can also be known as affinity bias. This means that we often judge someone based on as something that you see in yourself in that candidate. So as humans, we're programmed to gravitate towards the familiarity. You know, we feel more comfortable with people that we share common ground with. So an example of this could be, you know, you're interviewing a candidate and they went to a school that you went to, or you see listed on their resume that they have similar interests. So this would be affinity bias, and this can be perpetuated by asking candidates personal questions during the interview process instead of focusing on the questions that relate to the job requirements. All right, so.
Well, Esker, are you gonna take it from here with a video?
Yes, Denise, do you want to talk a little bit about the video and what folks should be thinking about? We're going to now do, we're going to watch a video of a real life scenario. And so I'll let Denise take that while I'm trying to figure out how to share my screen here to play the video.
So as you watch this video,
Denise, for some reason I can't hear you. Is it just me?
No, you're very low. The volume is low.
So
Oh, Hannah, it won't let me share because it says one participant can share at a time. All right, let me see advanced share option.
Okay. I'm no longer sharing, so you should be able to hypothetically. And you still have co-host permissions.
Share sound.
Thank you, Denise, for putting it in the chat, and I can read it aloud. So Denise is sharing with everybody. As you watch the video, please focus on all of the details, facial expressions, body language, words spoken, etc.
Can you all do me a favor? I'm going to start the video. Could someone just in the chat let me know if everyone can hear it? Thank you.
Right, who's next? So we've got Shanna McGregor from Glasgow. Are we Scottish, lass?
Please don't try and do a Scottish accent. It's painful.
Och, I the new. I guess we won't have trouble to get her to come for drinks with us after work, though.
So, Shona is the one who did 6 years at Livermore's before moving to Campbell Mavers.
Yeah, smart girl. Let's get her in.
Hi, Jennifer. Can you send Shona up, please? Thank you.
She looks really strong, I gotta say. Ticking all the right boxes for me.
Yeah, I'm interested to hear about her time at Campbell Mavers.
I'm sorry, can we help you?
Oh, sorry. Am I in the wrong room? I'm Shauna McGregor.
Oh my gosh, Shauna. I'm sorry, please, come in, have a seat.
Hi, Shona. Would you like a glass of water?
No, I'm fine.
Coffee? Tea?
I'm fine. Thanks.
Okay.
Thank you, Aliska. I will go back to sharing the slides.
Oh, thank you. I'm trying to bring you all up again. Perfect. So thinking about some of the, facial expressions, body language, words spoken, does anyone feel comfortable either putting it in the chat or raising their hand to talk about what you thought, what you saw, and what do you think about some of the biased comments and how they will impact the interview process, the hiring process? Harriet, let me just, perfect.
Hi, I'm struck by, they looked at Shirley's resume and were impressed. And the second she opened the door, they saw a Black person and asked the dumb question, are you looking for someone? So that was a really clear one. I know that feeling well. I had 120 interviews at one point in the early 90s, though I had a very good resume. They saw the white cane and thought, we can't accommodate that person. And of course, I didn't get a second interview. So I'm very aware that the visual impression one makes is a bias that just hits people below their radar in a pretty terrible way. So that's one thing I wanted to say, as well as the accent issue that came in the one before. I'm sure other people want to say other things. Thank you.
Thank you for sharing that, Harriet. Does anybody else want to share any initial reactions?
And then Ramon put in the chat, the brief clip illustrates well several of the points alluded to before. Absolutely.
Exactly. And think about how quick that was, right? That was a couple of minutes of an interaction and how many inappropriate things were said in such a short amount of time, which is, why it's so important that we're all, being thoughtful about this and not taking for granted, we would never do that. It does take that extra step of reflecting, listening, receiving feedback. Mary put in the chat, agree with your observations and comments. Also, the man referred to the interviewee as a girl. It's a great point. Yep. It's, all of these little microaggressions that just create, obviously this candidate was incredibly uncomfortable. She felt their biases and their judgments as soon as she walked in the door, which is obviously just entirely inappropriate. Laura shares the glances between the interviewers would definitely have an impact on the candidate's feeling and perception. Absolutely. There was, not that subtlety would make it better, but they were very overt in having these preconceived notions, passing these judgments, and, expressing their biases. Waleska, was there anything else that you wanted to share? And thank you all so much for
No,
sharing your thoughts. in
thank
the
you
chat.
so much. I just want to thank everyone for sharing their thoughts. And again, this is just one example, and we will have further trainings on this, but thank you again. I appreciate it. So I think we can move on to the next slide.
Great. Denise, I know you are having some internet challenges. Are you able to do the key takeaways, or do you want me to take it away? Okay, I want to respect the fact that Denise is probably struggling. I can take it. Thank you. Okay, so what are the key takeaways of why we're here? So we did again go over high level interviewing basics, and we will share the slides so you all do have access to that information. And if there are folks that want to go more deeply into actual interviewing, we can absolutely do additional trainings on that. But we did want to convey kind of general best practices for interviewing. We also just wanted to kind of challenge you all to always be mindful about these things and to always kind of stop and question when you find yourself making a judgment or making an assumption about somebody. We also, want to convey that a lot of what we're talking about is interviewing. So you'll have, your interview panel, and it's important that those panels hold each other accountable as well. And the Appointments Advisory Committee is a more formalized version of that, but that body also needs to do the work to hold each other accountable. If you're in an interview and somebody says something that's inappropriate, it is important that that is addressed, and it's not just kind of left. And we also, just wanted to impress upon you all again that while this is in the lens of recruiting, which is, incredibly important, we wanted to call to your attention the fact that this can, these kinds of things can arise in a number of situations that you all are also in often in your roles on these boards and commissions. So if you're reviewing an application, if somebody is going before you for some kind of approval, all of these different interactions are spaces where biases need to be challenged, and we need to make sure that the decisions that are being made based on fact and not based on assumption or preconceived notion or anything like that. Waleska, is there anything else that you wanted to add to these? Great. So thank you all once again for joining us for this and for bearing with us through numerous technical challenges. I appreciate your patience and your feedback. Are there any other additional questions that folks have? Either feel free to raise your hand or put it in the chat.
Hi, this is Harriet, and would you guys like feedback, or how would that work, or further questions? How would that work?
We're happy to take any questions. Harriet, if you have any specific feedback for us, we would be happy to have an additional conversation with you online or offline, excuse me, as well. Totally up to you, whatever you feel comfortable with.
I'm sorry. You said either online or offline? So,
yes. Whatever you feel comfortable with is fine.
Do you mean like
us.
phone call versus email versus what?
I mean, like right now, or we can have a separate conversation after this training.
Oh, sure. I'd like to make one other comment, which I'm sure you all have taken into consideration. A couple comments briefly. And I appreciate having the floor for a moment. So one of the things that I think is great about doing an anti-bias training is it starts to bring up our unconscious biases. And also, from my experience as a disability advocate for 40 odd years, is that even when we begin to be aware of our biases, bringing that into fruition on an everyday basis is such a challenge. And I know you said, well, we hold each other accountable. And if we're not careful, we can turn the accountability issue into a microaggression. So it's just a thought there. And in reviewing the questions, I was very curious about which the ones that we are supposed to use, for example, in the Disability Commission, for me, in reading them as a lifelong disabled person, I feel that they do not address people's experiences with disability directly, because whether it's their own or others, you know, or how they, why would they want to be on the commission? What are they attracted to? To me, it tends to lean heavily on the other biases or the other issues. And maybe that's the critical thing to lean on, but I think we need both. So, and the other question I have about the questions as they stand for us is that we want to have a wide range of applicants, but if we're not willing to put it in simpler language, better known as plain language, then we negate the possibility of people with some level of intellectual challenge. So those are just things to think over. And I don't expect to have an answer from you at all. It's just things that I'm thinking over personally, you know, from my lifelong experiences. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you so much for sharing that feedback, Harriet. That is, it's definitely very valuable to hear your perspective. And you know, all of this is a work in progress, and we are, you know, working to develop resources, but also acknowledging that these resources are continuing to evolve. And you know, we're always looking to improve the way that we're doing things. So I might actually reach out to you to get some more of your thoughts on the standardized questions. I would love to, you know, take an opportunity to workshop those further. So, you know, all of this is very fluid, which is part of why these trainings are really important. So we have this opportunity to have some dialogue and to get feedback from you. So thank you very much for sharing your perspective.
And I thank you for the space to speak these things. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Harriet. Are there any other questions? Anything that anybody wants to put in the chat, or if anybody wants to raise their hand and make a comment? We do have a couple of more minutes, so I just want to allow the time. If you've done a training with me before, you know that I'm not great at sitting in silence. But I will do it. I will do it. All right, I'll give folks one more minute in case anybody has any last minute thoughts they wanted to share. Okay, it's looking like not, so I'm going to stop sharing. I'm going to thank you all again so much for your time today. We really appreciate it. Please do, you know, reach out with any questions or concerns, and we will follow up with the slides. We'll be sharing the slides with your liaisons, and your liaisons should be following up with the video and our contact information if you wanted to reach out to us directly for any more specific questions. We are absolutely happy to talk about this all day. Thank you all very much. All right. Have a great rest of your day.